I had the opportunity yesterday to attend a talk in the Russian embassy here in Berlin. I think a couple of issues really that came to the fore. One is the Russian complaint or grievance that the NATO countries or the West don't always see things from a Russian point of view. And I think that's probably true, but I think it's true in reverse as well, that Russia doesn't always see things from the NATO countries' point of view. So, for instance, the contention of I think the American ambassador, one of the talks, and of James Scher at the Russian embassy, was that NATO wasn't expanding. Countries were wanting to join NATO, whereas Russia saw this as an expansionist project or expansionist program.
Russian ambassador to NATO gave a very clear-cut speech about the fact that the Western NATO members are not understanding Russia's position, point of view, its historical fears about NATO infringing upon its territorial space, its historical space that Russia sees as its own near abroad area. Russia was basically promised that after Poland there would be no further NATO enlargement, which has not happened, which was something that, in my opinion, throughout the entire conference was a little bit ignored. It was kind of pushed underneath the table. It was briefly mentioned once in a while and certain discussions came up, but never really acknowledged and never really addressed. So that was one special misunderstanding that Russia has been very angered about, and the fact that it feels like it's been treated as an unequal partner and has been basically since the end of the Cold War been treated as the loser and the one that has been humiliated by the West. The ambassador basically encouraged NATO members and aspiring NATO members to place themselves in Russia's shoes. Interestingly, whenever he spoke about Russia's position with cooperation with Europe on security, he just mentioned European security but not transatlantic security, which obviously excludes the United States, Canada, and so forth, which is a big player obviously in NATO, and I think that's one of the problems as to why Western European countries and aspiring NATO members are hesitant to engage with Russia.
The other issue that James Scher raised was the current Russian administration's worldview. He was at pains to say that we weren't entering a new Cold War, but rather that the worldview that Russia seems to be using at the moment would be recognizable to the Romanovs and to people from the 19th century, not even the 20th, in terms of great power politics and using intermediaries and almost a new great game. Even during the recent suspension of the normal NATO-Russia working relationship, there's been work going on where there are interests in common. Terrorism is one, potentially tactical missile defence rather than strategic tactical missile defence, and a good, stable world economy from which we can all benefit. I think one of the issues there, of course, is the energy market. That should be a positive relationship of mutual dependence. Russia wants to sell its gas, Europe wants to buy the gas, and instead it's become a very, very tense relationship. I think both sides have misplayed their hands, and I think it's unfortunate.
I personally am more pessimistic about the ability of European nations as a whole, Western, Central, Eastern European nations, to engage in a constructive dialogue with Russia about NATO. They've had a lot of opportunity and chances to do that. That was what the Russian NATO Council was established for. It has not filled any of the purposes it was sent out to fulfill. There has been no increased trust and increased dialogue between NATO and Russia on NATO issues. So that's the main problem, is that there has been actually a lack of communication, and the NATO-Russia Council has basically failed to fulfill any of its initial objectives.